everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I, Rebecca, recap live trials, except this week, no trials this week. It has been high and dry on YouTube. But you know what's been on YouTube every day? The Gilgo Beach murders. So you know what? We're going to spend a little time with that. But first, yeah, don't you love that Big Brother phase? I watched the premiere last night. Few days late because it takes them a little while to get it up on Paramount Plus. And take that any way you want to take it. That's what she said. Let's have some coffee, shall we? Mm-mm. So, if you are new to the channel, welcome. I am so glad you chose to subscribe to Crafting and Crime Daily. But on Fridays, we get up out of our chairs and we do a little jig. We do a little dance, the Friday dance. Ready? Out of your chairs, everybody. We're gonna get some hip action going here. Some Shakira. My hips don't lie. Ooh, ooh, my hips don't lie. Okay, I'm gonna need a hip replacement now. They're like, oh my God, what did I subscribe to? Help! So I'm working on the event painting again. I put away the logo painting because I had to part with it because I need to work on the event painting. And this is a cross stitch weekend too. I haven't had my cross stitch out in 2 weeks. I'm working on a crochet baby blanket. I need to start my my August gnome. The gnome that I'm doing for August is a back to school gnome. Yeah, it is. All right, but we're going to work on the event painting, and my light pad is not cooperating with me. It has some kind of electrical short in it, so it comes on and it goes off, and it comes on and it goes off. I can't afford another light pad. Oh, well. They're like, oh, she got paid. Let's break. Yeah. Do you have appliances like that? Me too. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about these Gilgo Beach murders. Yes. So this is something that started way back in, well, after this morning, could be as far back as 1996, because this morning, the task force that's been charged with investigating the Gilgo Beach murders identified another body. Now, they had several bodies that have been found. They've had them for years, and they haven't been able to identify. Well, they identified one this morning. Now, this one, they haven't charged anybody with her murder, but they came out, they had a press conference, and they identified this person. And they did it through familial genealogy, DNA. What they do is they take a sample from the victim, the DNA, they run it through this huge database that's made up of all these, you and me and whatever those DNA sites where you can find out your ancestry. Well, all the people that have ever done that, they're in this database. So they run the DNA through this database and they're trying to come up with somebody that could be related to the victim. So they do come up with somebody. They talk to that person, and the person said, yeah, she's been missing since 1996. Now, if they're able to tie that to the defendant that they have in custody for the Gilgo Beach murders, that's going to be really interesting. Now, they did say where her remains were found, and to be honest with you, I haven't looked that up yet to see if they were found in the vicinity of the Gilgo Beach murder victims. That would be really interesting. And I have a lot of questions. A lot of questions. So let's talk about this case. Well, how did this case come about? So this is really, really interesting. This woman named Shannon Gilbert, she goes missing in 2010. She was working as an escort. Now, she had a mom, she had a sister, and her mom and her sister, they're living there. She's living with her boyfriend. Well, the boyfriend calls the sister and he says, "Have you seen Shannon?" And she's like, he's asking, is she with you guys? And she's like, "No, I haven't seen Shannon." So they try to report Shannon missing and they get a huge runaround. So what apparently happened was they find Shannon. She's working as an escort. So first of all, let me talk. I can talk about this escort thing first. Let's just have a moment, shall we? Back in the day, hookers hung out on the corners. Maybe they still do. I don't know. And you flagged down the vehicles, and you made your transaction, and the John was watching from somewhere else. Well, nowadays you work as an escort through Craigslist, and you have a driver. So Shannon took a job out in an area of Long Island called Oak Island. And Michael, her driver, drives her out there. And he's driving around and he's like, this is really dark out here. There's no streetlights on Ocean Boulevard in this exclusive area of Long Island. The Massapequa area. This is doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. Yeah, the whole 9 yards living in this remote area. So he drives her to the home of this person that hired her to be an escort. She's in the home for a couple hours. He's out in the car taking a nap, protecting her. And the guy comes running out of his house, knocks on his window, and says, you need to get this crazy woman out of here. So Michael gets out of his car, he and this client, and they go back into the client's home, and she's cowering in the corner, and she's called 911, and she's telling the 911 operator, they're trying to kill me. Who's trying to kill you? And she's just, clearly psychotic from her habit of, well, I don't know if she had a habit of methamphetamine and heroin, but it sounds like she had a bad methamphetamine trip. That's what it sounds like to me. She's just psychotic. So she runs out the door screaming. She runs to some neighbors of the client, banging on their door. They're trying to calm her down. Eventually, she runs out into this swampy area, marshy area. You have the homes, then you have Ocean Boulevard, and then you have this marshy area that's wet and icky, and beyond that is the beach. So she runs out there. Now, like I said, no street lights. It's pitch dark. She just runs out there. Well, nobody runs after her, and she's never seen again. So they interview Michael, they interview the client, the police do. Police eventually do get involved. It took them like 5 hours to respond to the 911 call she made that night. Then it took them another 4 months to take the investigation seriously and actually put boots on the ground and start interviewing the neighbors she ran over to and other people. But so the driver was cleared, the client was cleared, but they don't know where Shannon Gilbert is. So they're looking through all this area and they're not finding her. So one day, December 11th of 2010, a canine officer, he's out there. He had been part of the search for Shannon, and he knew they were searching for her, and he's out in this area of Gilgo Beach alongside of Ocean Boulevard. Now, my theory is he just stopped to let his dog out go pee, but he said it was a training exercise. So the dog's walking around, and the dog comes up with some remains. Ooh, yeah. So they bring out the cavalry, start investigating, and within 48 hours, they have 3 more sets of remains, all within 500 yards of each other along this Ocean Boulevard. Yeah, which is this isolated, it's called Ocean Parkway, not Boulevard, Ocean Parkway. I must have lived on an Ocean Boulevard at some point in my life. I don't know. Okay, so I digress. So, who were the 4 sets of remains that were found? Well, it was Melissa Bartholomew, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. None of them were Shannon Gilbert. Nope. So they tell Shannon's family, and they're like, you're going to keep looking for her? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They do eventually find the remains of Shannon Gilbert out in that marshy area where she ran out. They drained the marsh. They found her remains. She has not been linked to the Gilgo 4, which is what the victims Those 4 sets of remains were known as, after that, the Gilgo 4. She hasn't been linked with them, but they found many, many other sets of remains out there. This was apparently a dumping ground for the remains of sex workers. So what did these 4 women have in common? So that's the first thing we want to know. What links them together? Well, they were all less than 5 foot tall. They were all very petite, less, right around 100 pounds, 95 to 110, all in that area. I haven't seen that since I was like 8. Yeah, or that height. They had all been in contact with someone who was using a burner phone. They were all petite. Like I said, they were all sex workers. They were all missing clothing. They were all positioned very similarly and wrapped in this burlap material. And they all died by homicide. Now, the reason they were able to tell these remains were not Shannon Gilbert is because Shannon's boyfriend, the one that called to see if she was at Mom's house, the boyfriend had broke her jaw once. He punched her. He didn't mean to, and he never did it again after that. Okay. So, alrighty. She had to have her jaw reconstructed. So none of the remains that had been found, the Gilgo Beach 4, had any of those features in the remains. So they knew it wasn't Shannon Gilbert. But they were able to identify those women nonetheless. So let's talk a little bit about those women. The first one, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Now, Maureen is the one that has not been charged. Her death has not been charged yet. So, although there's so many similarities to the other 3 victims, I'm not sure why they had that the defendant that is in custody has not been charged with this murder. But we're going to talk about Maureen. She was last seen on July 9th of 2007. When they looked at her phone, they found that she had been in contact with someone who had a burner phone. And between July 6th and 9th, there were 16 interactions between Maureen and this person on the burner phone. From July 9th through July 12th, there was no activity, but then there were 2 calls to a voicemail on July 12th, and that's it. Now, she was last seen on July 12th when she left her home in Connecticut to go do a job in New York City. She was also an escort. She was spotted in Manhattan but never seen again. She did have a daughter named Nicolette. She was described as being a very good mother, and she was a very trusting person. The second victim is Melissa Bartholomew. She was 24 years old, 4'11", 95 pounds. She was working as a stripper in New York City. She was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. She went to South Park High School. After that, she decided, I'm going to beauty school. She went to Continental Beauty School. She worked at Supercuts, but you know what? She wasn't making no money. She needed to make more money. It's expensive to live in New York. So, she was paying $700 a month for a basement apartment in Tremont, which is a Bronx neighborhood. They had interviewed the landlord, and the landlord said that she had been, in addition to stripping, she had been working as an escort through Craigslist. I think all these women did. She had 8 cats. That's Mama Girl. We love some cats. Yes, yes, yes. Now, she had a younger sister named Amanda Funderburg. Her younger sister was 15 years old. They also found that Melissa deposited $900 into her bank account, but then never touched it. They also checked her phone, that she had tried to call her ex-boyfriend, and there was no answer. Then there was voicemails from a couple of hotels, the in Massapequa, the Budget Inn, and the Best Western. And eerily enough, this is so eerie, Amanda, who's 15 years old, starts getting these phone calls from what they now believe was probably the murderer. And he's taunting her, telling her, your sister's a prostitute and she's a terrible person. This person made 7 different phone calls to Amanda. It was reported to police, and they tried to trace these phone calls. Where they got traced to was downtown Manhattan. Someone who probably works in the area, there's surmise, was going out in the middle of the crowd. So even if there was surveillance that caught this person making a phone call in the middle of Manhattan, they wouldn't have been able to figure this out, go after him in time. And he knew the exact amount of time that it would take to identify where the call was coming from. And most of the time, he would hang up before they would be able to identify where it was coming from. But when they did, it was from downtown Manhattan. Interestingly, when Melissa left on the 12th, July 12th, she got into a car. Amanda saw her get into a car that was described as a Chevy Avalanche. Now, we know that the defendant, at the time of these murders, drove a Chevy Avalanche. So she was able to describe this Chevy Avalanche to the police. This is the car my sister got into, and she was never seen again. Then the next victim was Amber Lynn Costello, 27 years old, 4'10", 100 pounds. She grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. She worked as a prostitute in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, for a number of years before she landed up in New York City. Now, she was brought into the escort business by her sister, Kimberly. Kimberly had started doing this and was making a lot of money. So she brings her sister in. She's like, hey, you just have to set your boundaries. You have to be prepared to run if you need to run, but it's really good money. So once she gets her sister in, she goes, we were making as much as $3,000 a week. Unfortunately, her sister starts rooming with this guy and they get into drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, and then it became all about the next fix for her sister Amber, unfortunately. Now, Kimberly tried to get her sister Amber into a rehab, but that didn't happen. She had been married a couple of times. Amber had. Those relationships did not work out, and one of them got her into heroin use. The last one was Megan Waterman. She was 22 years old. She was last seen on June 6th of 2010, also working as an escort. She lived in Scarborough, Maine, and the last time she was seen, she was getting on a bus headed for New York City with her driver. Her driver? Yeah. She was staying at a Holiday Inn Express in New York. On June 6th, she was seen leaving the Holiday Inn Express at 1:30 a.m. She had a 3-year-old daughter, and family members reported her missing when she failed to contact them because she apparently would call on a regular basis to speak with her daughter, and she stopped contacting them. So that's when she was reported missing. Now, how did all this come about? How did they get a suspect? That's what I want to know. Well, what happened was in January of 2022, they put together a multi agency task force. This included people from the FBI, the Suffolk County Police Department, New York State Police, and the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. Now, once you put a task force together, then you've got some teeth, you've got some money. People are getting paid entirely to investigate the Gilgo 4. That's what this became known as. And since then, there's a series on A&E called The Killing Season that's all about the Gilgo 4. There's a movie about Shannon Gilbert, and I am so sorry I don't know the name of it. I watched it, it's boring. But it's all about how mom was an advocate for the investigation of her daughter's disappearance and how she had to advocate because they were basically ignoring her because she was a sex worker. Same goes for all these women. They just weren't taking it seriously enough. So in January of 2022, after so much criticism of not taking this seriously enough, they put together this task force. And they said, we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to do this comprehensive review of all of the evidence. They issued over 300 subpoenas, search warrants. They got cell phone billing records from all the victims. And they said they all disappeared in the Massapequa area. Yeah. So how did they get Rex Heuermann? So apparently after they put together and got all these cell phone records of the victims, they were able to trace the burner phone that they were all getting these phone calls from, and they were traced it back to Rex Heuermann's office. Remember I told you he's an architect and he has his own firm downtown Manhattan? Yep. Then they discover that at the time of the murders, he is driving a Chevy Avalanche, as was seen by Amber Costello's sister. Then they found a Timber ad. Timber? Why am I saying Timber? I've never been on Tinder. They found a Tinder ad that led back to his burner phone. And he matches the description. One of the victims, before she vanished, described him as this ogre like person. Now he's 6'6", a very menacing presence. So, and I can see now that they've got this guy in custody how they would get an ogre. Yeah, that kind of fits. It really does. And they found his wife's DNA on 3 out of the 4 victims. That was probably transfer DNA. It was probably on his clothing and it got onto the victims. But that's really interesting because, as far as I know, she's not in any trouble. She is divorcing the man. She's like, I'm out of here. And when they searched his home, they tore her home apart. They cut out parts of the bathtub. Yeah, just ripped their place to shreds and then left. Yeah, she had left her with a huge mess to clean up after their search. But they also found that he was searching. When they looked at his computer, he had searched over 200 times updates on the Gilgo Beach murders. Then they found pictures of the victims. They found pictures of the victims' relatives. And they found tons of pictures of these, I think they called it torture porn, women that are being tortured and raped, part of as pornography. Uh, okay. So a sick guy nonetheless. So he was arrested for 3 of the 4 Gilgo 4 murder victims. Yes. Now this is a case that's going to keep on giving. uh, like I said, they had a press conference this morning where they revealed that they had identified another of these victims. Several of these sets of remains that were found along Ocean Parkway have never been identified. So one was able to be identified this morning. Now, it has not yet been linked to the defendant Rex Heuermann, but you never know. And we also know that people in other jurisdictions, such as Las Vegas, Nevada, a small town called Hendersonville outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, places where Rex Heuermann has visited, if he's related to any of the cases that they have of dead sex workers. Yeah. Was this his MO? I don't know. Is there more than one serial killer? There, statistically, any given time, there are 200 to 300 at least serial killers running around this country. You're like, what? Oh yeah, it's a thing. It really is. I don't have to make this stuff up. Yeah, I don't. They're out there. And a lot of them have not been found. Interesting. So I'm going to be live tonight with my good buddy Mickey Sunshine Creates for the continuation of my diamond painting event, The Great Escape 2023. And we're going to be interviewing Alyssa from a little company called DiamondPaintingDrills.com. She's going to tell us all about her specials for the event. And we're going to talk all things bling tonight. So that's at 6:30 Central. It'll be on my channel. It'll be on Mickey Sunshine's channel. Doesn't matter where you watch it. Just come. If you're not in the event, come on anyway. Let's talk crime. Come on. All right. I'll see you guys then. Bye, everybody.